Hi, my name is Leigh Harrington, and this is my book, 100 Things to Do in Boston Before You Die. Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming in. My name is Leigh Harrington. I'm a local author, and this is my first book, 100 Things to Do in Boston Before You Die. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about me, about the book, read you a few of the entries, and then take some questions, and be pretty informal about it. So I'm a local writer. I'm a travel writer, actually. I've been doing that for 15 years. If you can't hear me, just flag me down. I've been doing that for 15 years, covering Boston in particular and the New England region. I work for Where magazine. It's a travel magazine. It's in hotels. If you travel, we're all over the world. But I head up the Boston market, which is part of the reason that I was approached to author the book. This book in particular, it's published by Reedy Press, which is a small press in St. Louis. And this is probably the sixth edition of the book that they've done. It's a serial. So they have a few around the country, 100 Things to Do in Miami, Memphis, LA, New York. So last July we added Boston to the list. The book itself is a bucket list book. It's meant to appeal to a variety of readers. Oh, it's got a wide audience, everybody from families to baby boomers to college kids. It's a great gift book for people who have just moved to the Boston area or who live in the Boston area and just never, get out to do the things that you should do as a Bostonian, that you've read about as a Bostonian but just haven't gotten around to do. The book itself is broken down into 5 categories. So that makes it really easy to read and really easy to find things that are of interest to you individually. It's not a book you have to sit and read from start to finish. You can flip around. You can go to different sections. So the sections are entertainment and nightlife, history and culture, sports and recreation, fashion and shopping, and food and drink. There's also, what I really like about the book too is in the back, in the indice, there's, it breaks down into itineraries. So, if there are suggested itineraries, if you're into doing something that's like classic Boston, you can go here and follow which ones would be of interest to you. If you have kids, if you're a history buff, if you're a foodie, if you're into fashion, that type of thing. So it makes it really easy to navigate the book. Coming up with 100 things to do in Boston. People always ask me, was that really difficult to come up with 100 different things? It wasn't really. I mean, it's something that I do every day for my job. Know the ins and outs of culture. I cover culture, shopping, fashion, all of that, restaurants. So it's something that, I've spent the last 15 years researching. So my list was huge. And it was more trouble for me to narrow it down to 100 things. But I also knew where my weaknesses were, like sports and fashion stuff. So I made sure I consulted, some people that were more expert in that area than I was. It took me about 6 months to write the book, and I did do everything, every experience in the book except for one, which I couldn't do because I was assigned the book in October, and it was due in April, and it was something you have to do over the summer, camping on the Boston Harbor Islands. But that is definitely not to miss. Very fun. So what I thought I would do is read a few entries and go over them, and if you guys have any questions. I thought I'd start with one of my favorites. It's Overdose on Chocolate at the Langham. Does everybody know the Langham Hotel? It's a nice hotel downtown, and they do this chocolate bar every Saturday, So that's what this experience is. For more than a quarter century, this financial district luxury hotel has been encouraging its guests to mainline chocolate on Saturday afternoons. The famed chocolate bar is the sweets addict's dream come true, with 200 pounds of white milk and dark chocolate turned into decadent bite-sized desserts. Pastry creations might appear as a caramel chocolate mousse bomb, bacon banana tart, or white chocolate pistachio tart, but the overall theme reflects the season and changes annually. Besides all that, there's a dip-it-yourself chocolate fountain, molten lava cakes to order, a homemade ice cream and mix-in station, custom chocolate fruit crepes, cotton candy, and for the 21-plus crowd, deliciously boozy chocolate cocktails. This is one of my favorites for obvious reasons. Who doesn't like chocolate? But it's fun because I find that there's always things in Boston that it's such a city that's it's so old and it's so full of rich history that it's literally at every turn. So this stuck out in my mind because I had been before I did this book a number of times, and then I went back when I did this, and I got there a little early, and they had me wait in the Wyeth room, which is next door to where the chocolate bar is. And if you go in that room, you'll see that these big paintings that are up on the wall, and they're actually painted by N.C. Wyeth, who, if you're an art fan, he's the father of Andrew Wyeth and the grandfather of Jamie Wyeth, who are both realist painters, and they have their work in the Museum of Fine Arts. So the building itself used to be the Federal Reserve, and these works by N.C. Wyeth were created for the space. So it's just a really interesting thing. You know, you can go for a chocolate bar and wait in this room and find these world-class paintings just hanging around. So since the summer's coming up, rather than just select a few random entries, I thought I'd pick a few that would be of interest to the summer season. So one of my favorites also has to do with sweets. It's Scream for Ice Cream at Christina's. Christina's is an ice cream shop. It's been in Inman Square section of Cambridge for years. And they make their ice cream in-house. They use really interesting ingredients, spices, all sorts of things from all over the world, and it's really good. So there's a reason ice cream is one of the signature desserts of a New England summer. It's cold on the palate when the weather is sweaty, and it's just darn good. Among the pack of local creameries, Christina's stands out as one of the best. Better yet, you don't have to go to Vermont to taste it. Every day, more than 40 creamy, tempting handmade flavors stock the cases of this modest Inman Square landmark. Basics like chocolate and vanilla are always available, but encourage your taste buds to walk on the wild side with Mexican chocolate, malted vanilla, burnt sugar, fresh rose, adzuki bean, or dandelion burdock. Then take a seat on one of the few church pews and thank the heavens for this cup of divine stuff. Has everyone here been to a baseball game at Fenway Park? Yes. Has anybody taken a Fenway Park tour? Okay. So of course I wrote up Fenway Park because you have to. You can't leave that out. But the one I'm going to read you is for the Fenway Park tour, which I think escapes a lot of locals. Some visitors will hit it because, you know, it's sort of on their radar, whether they talk to the hotel concierge or whatever. But I think a lot of locals miss this one, so it's interesting. So this is Just Hunt, baseball's oldest ballpark. It doesn't have to be baseball season to gain access to America's oldest and most revered ballpark. Heck, you don't even have to be a baseball fan to appreciate the 103 years of history uncovered in its hallowed tunnels and underbelly. Hour-long guided Fenway Park tours visit the press box, the monster seats, the grandstand, and more. Along the way, learn that the Boston Red Sox was originally named the Americans from 1903 to 1907, and that the Sox was the first team to win the first World Series ever played, while you examine the actual championship trophy. See a display exhibit titled Fenway and the Greatest Generation, which spotlights Sox players and their military service through items like Ted Williams' Marines aviator jacket. Find out which bricks of Fenway Park are original, and then sit in the oldest seats, literally, in Major League Baseball. I'm not a baseball fan, but I think Fenway Park is just one of the most magical landmarks in Boston. It's just filled with history. It's great, even if you're not a baseball fan, to go see a game there. It's different to sit in the stands with the fans and just watch a game, whether you're rooting for one of the teams or not. And then to walk through, I don't know what you'd call them, but the hallway areas that are outside the ballpark, outside the field, but still inside the ballpark, without being pushed through crowds, is really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of murals. There's a lot of, thank you. I have like a cold, so thank you. There's a lot of murals. There's a lot of displays, like I said, and it's really interesting. You learn about baseball, but you also learn about different sides to the players' lives, like Ted Williams and his military service. This next one is really interesting. You can spend the night on Boston Harbor, literally. Drop anchor at the Liberty Star the next time you come to town and spend the night rocking and rolling to the lapping waves of Boston Harbor. To be sure, this is no climate-controlled Marriott, but it's a gorgeous coastal schooner that's part of the Liberty fleet of tall ships and a temporary bunk for up to 6 would-be sailors wanting to essentially camp out in downtown Boston. Cabins are basic and the head is shared, but unless you own a sailboat, how else could you say you got to sleep on one? That's a really cool experience. It's a really big, it's just a schooner, so it's a really large, it's a replica ship, but it's gorgeous. And during the day, it sails out into Boston Harbor, and its passengers get to raise the rigging, raise the sails, and then at night you get to sleep on it. So for like $60, it's really not expensive, and it's a cool experience, and it's right in downtown Boston, so there's no better location. And the last one is also in Boston Harbor. This is a super fun one. Did you guys know that Boston is one of the top 10 whale watching destinations in the world? We're right off of Stellwagen Bank, which is right in between, where Cape Ann comes down and meets Provincetown. It's right out that way. And it's right on the migratory route of whales from Canada down to Florida. So between May and October, there's just a lot of activity there, and you can see humpback whales, right whales, minke whales, finback, all sorts of aquatic mammals. It's a really cool experience. Hop aboard a Boston Harbor Cruises catamaran and start scanning the horizon for puffs of white smoke. You're headed 30 miles off the coast of Boston to seriously prime territory for whale watching. Nutrient-rich feeding ground, Stellwagen Bank is easily one of the world's best locations for this water sport because it is on the whale's migratory route between Canada and the Caribbean. New England Aquarium naturalists educate passengers on what to look for during this 3-hour sail, like unusual splashing or dorsal fins at the surface. The time of season determines what kind of marine animals and mammals you are likely to see. Humpback whales show off tricks while they feed, like creating bubble nets and occasionally fully breaching the surface with all the grace of Nadia Comaneci. Minke whales and finback whales are fairly common sights, as are Atlantic white-sided dolphins and ocean sunfish, a fish that can weigh up to a ton and lays on its side at the surface for warmth. And well, if you don't see a single thing while you're out on the water, New England Aquarium and Boston Harbor Cruises give you a free ticket for a future ride. So, yeah, so those are some of my favorites. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to open up the floor to some questions. If you guys have any questions about the process or about some of the entries or anything. Yes.
You said you had a big list. What would have been 101?
I'd say that one more time. What would have
been 101?
You know, I actually had one in here that the publisher didn't want to run, and I was brokenhearted because I thought it was really cool, and they thought it was a little gross. But the Boston Athenaeum is a library in town. It's like a private membership library, but it's open to the public at certain times, and you can go in and visit it. They have in their collection a book. It's called the Skin Book, and it's covered in human skin. So the story is that there was a highwayman back in I think the 1800s, and his name was James Allen, and he robbed this guy, and the guy survived the attack, and James Allen went to jail, and so he was in jail, and I guess he felt, he felt remorse or whatever, but he dictated his life, his memoir, essentially, to the warden of the jail, and the warden took it down, and James Allen said, "When I die, skin me and tan my skin and cover the book and give it to the victim." I forget the victim's name. So they did that, and that the victim's family has now donated the book to the Boston Athenaeum, and it's in the collection, and you can go in. You have to make an appointment, but you can go in and see it, and it's just cool. I just thought it was cool. I don't know, but they didn't think so, so that was out. So that would have been my 101. Yes.
As a travel writer, what's the best part and the worst part of your job?
Gosh. I think they're probably the same thing. I would say, this book actually is a great complement to what I do during the day. So for the magazine, we have a very specific audience, and I have to, in very limited space. So I have to be very careful with what I select to put in the magazine, and make sure that it interests travelers to Boston who are here for a limited amount of time. And with this book, it's my book, so I got to, I find out through my wear job, I find out a lot of great things that don't necessarily have a place in the magazine, and so this book was a way for me to get that kind of thing in, and also in a more permanent fashion. Like one thing, the New England Aquarium is I'm sure you've all been there, but they have this really cool program that lets patrons paint with seals. So you get to go in and go into the seal area that's at the front there with a trainer, and he's got like this little apparatus with a paintbrush in it, and the seal comes over, takes it, dips it in the paint, and gets it up on the canvas that you're holding, and this whole rigmarole. He goes, does a swim, comes back, does the same thing, and then you get to take that home with you, and that kind of thing I find so cool. And sometimes you don't necessarily get to get those details into the magazine. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. So I think that for me, the best part about the job is finding out all this information and really like getting to do something that I love, and that I find interesting for my work, because so many people don't enjoy what they do. But the worst part of it for me is that I can't tell everybody everything about it. It's hard to share it sometimes. So, any other questions? Yes?
So your list, what was the process for identifying these 100 things?
So, when I first got the assignment from from the publisher, he asked me to come up with a list of like 50. So I had a good amount of time to do that. So I just mull it over, and every time I have a little list on my phone, and every time I thought of something, or even at work if I was doing research for something else and I came across something, I'd write it down. I knew that there were things that I wanted to include that I'm not, I don't have personal interest in, or I just don't have experience in, but I knew I would have to include, sports, for example. I'll watch a football game, I'll go to a football game or whatever, but that's about the extent of it, and so I made sure that I asked people, I did my research and I asked people questions like, for example, I have a friend, Eric, who's really into sports and the Bruins particularly. And so I did my little write-up of the Bruins and I sent it to him. And he was like, no. Let me find it for you. Okay, 64. So he told me little gems like, so I have Catch a Game at the Garden, the Bruins. I talked about it. He told me who was this. I'll read it to you. So look out for the big bad Bruins. Boston's hometown NHL team cultivates an experience that the uninitiated need to be ready for. In the stands of the TD Garden, a rabid lunch pail fan base cheers for and jeers at players, hoping for another great Garden moment, like Bobby Orr's goal in overtime during Game 4 of the 1970 Stanley Cup Final against the St. Louis Blues. Didn't know that. The Bruins are one of the NHL's original 6 teams and one of the most storied franchises in North America. In 2011, the team won the Stanley Cup, and today it features seriously stellar players like Tuukka Rask, Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara, and Milan Lucic. If you're easily offended, this one's not for you. But the tip he gave me was to go to soak up the atmosphere with a beer before or after a game at Sully's, which is Sullivan's Tap, a dive bar across the street from the Garden and a favorite hangout among local hockey enthusiasts. And then we went on to basketball, and he also said, here's your alternative to an out-of-control day at the mall on Black Friday, a Celtics-Bruins doubleheader, a ritual that takes place on the day after Thanksgiving. So, I made sure I surrounded myself with people that know the thing and could give me, I'd interview them and talk to them and say, what's this experience like? What's that? And they would give me information, and then I would take it from that. So I used that a lot to get the list. And then, I never had a full list. I didn't create a list of 100 things before I started writing. So I had a list of 50 or 60. And then I started writing, and then that would go up, and then I'd take things off. I'd find out new things. I'd take things off, and the publisher would say, I don't like that. I'd take that off. So that was how the process was. It was just kind of always moving, and, I didn't really know what the final 100 things were going to be until about a month before I was done with the book. So, yes.
Does your book include only Boston area or the Great Boston or?
So yeah, that's a good question. That was up to me as the writer, but I feel like, I don't know if you guys read a lot of guidebooks, but I feel like people are always saying the best things to do in Boston, or, ways to explore Boston with the kids, and then they talk about Southborough or Natick or the Berkshires, and that's not really Boston. So if this thing was going to have Boston as it on its cover, then I wanted to talk about the Boston area, and there's plenty in the Boston area. So it's Boston, Cambridge, Brookline, and Somerville, and experience in the field, those are what people consider under the umbrella term Boston. So those are the areas that the book covers. Yes.
Do you give other information in the book, like websites and?
Oh yes. So each one has the essential information: the location, phone number, website. Yeah. Oh yes. Yep.
You're gonna have a second edition,
I don't know. Yeah, they'll definitely update it. This came out in July, so hopefully there are some things that are no longer. Johnny D's closed, so that's inaccurate. But I think that they will in a year or two put out another edition, definitely. So, but I didn't pick anything that was crazy like. Is that going to happen next year? Is it not? Everything in here is pretty evergreen. There's only a few seasonal events like the Boston Marathon, which has been around for 120 years. That's not going to change. The head of the Charles Regatta, the Nutcracker at the Boston Ballet, that kind of thing. So, it should be pretty accurate and pretty evergreen. So, anybody else? Okay, well, if you're interested in the book, we have some copies here. But yeah, unless you have any other questions, thank you guys so much for coming down, and I hope you enjoyed the talk and the book, and thanks.
Thank you.